All right. So this is just kind of an example of what you're going to learn. So a particular battery manufacturer produces AA batteries that are designed to last an average of 17 hours with a standard deviation of 0.8 hours. Quality control inspectors select a random sample of 50 batteries during each hour of production. And they then drain them under conditions that mimic normal use. Here are the lifetime in hours of the batteries from one such sample. I did not type all those out, you guys, but pretend like there's 50 of these numbers that are all somewhat around this number, right? Okay, the true mean. So then we have, do the data suggest that the production process is working properly? So remember we talked about that kind of 5% being our guideline, and if you could reject that true mean or not. We did some of those problems before. So if we got a really small percentage, we would be like, well, yeah, it might not be true. And if we got a high percentage, then it's probably a true value of what the actual battery lifespan is. All right, so how could the battery manufacturers in the previous slide find the true mean lifetime, which is called mu, of all the batteries produced in an hour? Okay. So mu, you guys, we are going to start to differentiate between x bar and mu, and now you have to know the difference. So it kind of was interchangeable before. Now you have to know the difference. So how could we find the actual mean, you guys, of all of the batteries produced in an hour? Well, we could take every single battery and we could drain them all and find the average, right? That would be the true mean. Do we want to waste all the batteries? No. That's why we take a sample of 50, okay? So we don't want to waste all the batteries. We're going to take a sample and make sure then that it is close to the true mean. So instead of doing that, the manufacturer takes 50 batteries produced each hour and tests them. The company's goal is to use the sample mean, which is this guy, to estimate the unknown population mean, which is what we're going to do oftentimes, okay? So the sample mean is x bar, and the unknown population mean is mu. We're going to take a sample, find that mean, and estimate the actual true mean of mu. All right, this is an example of statistical inference. When we use information from a sample to draw conclusions. Welcome. Your seat is opposite now. Okay. So we use information from samples to draw conclusions about a larger population. You guys can write down that definition. Statistical inference. So let's say we were doing a sample of households that was contacted by CPS, and the mean income was $69,677. This number, that $69,677, is called a statistic because it describes this one CPS sample. And we're going to write this definition in a minute. But this is a statistic, which is this number, and it goes with samples. S goes with S. Statistics goes with samples, okay? Statistics are numbers, whereas a sample is what we're actually doing. We're taking some number of the households to really make some sort of observation about the population. All right. So the population that the poll wants to draw conclusions about is all 121 million U.S. households. Okay? In this case, the parameter of interest is the mean income, mu, of all of these households. Okay? So parameters go with populations. So population is the 121 million. The parameter we don't know. So in this case, we want to know what's the true mean income of everybody in the U.S., right? The 69,677 is a sample, right? That's what we got from the sample. So I want to know what the true mean is, which is called a parameter. So P and P, parameter goes with population. So definition, a parameter is a number that describes some characteristic of the population. Okay, a parameter is a number that describes some characteristic of the population. Usually we find the mean, right? A lot of times it's the mean. We can find other things, the median, Q1, Q3, the range, all right? Sometimes it's that. Just depends on what the problem's talking about. And then we've got a statistic, which is a number that describes some characteristic of a sample. So again, P and P, S and S, so you don't forget. Okay, parameters goes with population, statistics go with samples. And parameter is a number, and statistic is a number, like possibly the mean. All right, so you're going to have to know the symbols, okay? And you do lose credit on the AP exam if you can't differentiate between these, all right? And if you mix them up. So make sure you get this down throughout this chapter, all right? So X bar, this represents the sample mean. Okay, mu represents the population mean. Another word you can use is the true mean. Okay, so a lot of times we take a sample and we're trying to find the true mean. Okay, then we have p hat and p. So p hat is a sample proportion. What's a proportion? It's a fraction or a decimal, okay? So this is when we're saying a percent of something that's happening, okay? So sample proportion might be like a 0.25, all right? So think decimals, all right? And then P is the true proportion or the population proportion. Okay, so if you're talking about unemployment rate, we would use P and P hat, all right, for the true unemployment rate and the sample. All right, so let's try a problem. Identify the population, the parameter, the sample, and the statistic in each of the following problems. All right, so the population, oftentimes we're using words to describe. The parameter is the number, okay, that goes with that population of what we're trying to find. Sample, we're using words to describe. We might have a number like 200 people or something. And then the statistic is the data that you got from that sample. Okay, so a Gallup poll asked a random sample of 515 U.S. adults whether or not they believe in ghosts. Of the respondents, 160 said yes. Okay, so for A, let's start by identifying our population. Okay, sometimes things are unknown. Remember, parameters are often unknown. So population, let's go with anyone. Have a guess. You guys raise your hands. I'll let you decide what you think it is. Ginger. Yes, all U.S. adults is our population. All right, and then we'll do the parameter because it goes with population. Anyone have an idea what the parameter would be in this one? Do we know the parameter? The actual number. Donovan? 515 is the what? Sample. Okay. The sample would be the 515. So our parameter, you guys, is what we're trying to find. And we're trying to find the true number, right? So we found that 160 out of 515 in this sample, right, of U.S. adults said they believe in ghosts. So we're trying to find the true parameter of U.S. adults that believe in ghosts. Do we know that number? No. We only know what the sample told us. So the parameter is P, right? It's always P because it's a proportion in this case. And we want to find the proportion of all U.S. adults who believe in ghosts. If we knew that number, we would write it down. Okay? Sometimes it's given in the problem. Now we've got the sample. All right, we already talked about this. So the sample is the 515 U.S. adults. Okay, those are the ones we interviewed. And then the statistic is the number that goes with the sample. So, in this case, you guys, P is the true proportion. So the statistic is P hat. And we've got to learn the difference between P and P hat. So P hat is the statistic. We are talking proportions, which means I want a fraction or decimal. Usually we make these a decimal. All right? So in this case, it's 160 out of 515, which is equal to 0.31. So this is the proportion of the sample that believe in ghosts. All right, so those were all the P's proportions. So let's do part B. During the winter months, the temperature outside the Starnes' cabin in Colorado can stay well below freezing, 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, for weeks at a time. To prevent the pipes from freezing, Mrs. Starnes sets the thermostat at 50 degrees Fahrenheit. She wants to know how low the temperature actually gets in the cabin. A digital thermometer records the indoor temperature at 20 randomly chosen times during the day. The minimum temperature reading is 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? So we got to identify the population, parameter, sample, and statistic. I'm going to write small up here. Okay, anyone have a guess as to what the population would be? Tyler, what do you think? Throughout the day? Yep, in this case, it's actually every time throughout the day, but we are taking the temperature. That's the parameter. The population is going to be every time throughout the day. All right, and the parameter is always a number, but we may not know it. Okay, what are we trying to find? We're trying to find how low the temperature actually gets in the cabin. So the parameter is that actual minimum. So the true minimum temperature in the cabin that day. Okay, now we've got our sample. Taylor, what do you think the sample is? Yep, we took 20 random temps throughout the day. Okay, which was at randomly selected times. And the statistic is the number that goes with that. The minimum reading is 38 degrees Fahrenheit. So the minimum would be the 38 degree Fahrenheit temperature. So we're not always using an X or a P, because P is a proportion and X bar is a mean. In this case, we use the min. Okay? All right. Each bold-faced number in questions 1 and 2 is the value of either a parameter or a statistic. In each case, state which it is. Parameters go with what, you guys? Population. Statistics go with what? Samples. Okay. So state which one it is and use appropriate notation to describe the number. In other words, an X bar, a mu, a P, or a P hat. Okay. So on Tuesday, the bottles of Arizona iced tea filled in a plant were supposed to contain an average of 20 ounces of iced tea. So you have to define or say what the 20 is. Quality control inspectors sampled 50 bottles at random from the day's production. These bottles contained an average of 19.6 ounces of tea. So you want to say what the 19.6 is. Okay, so you should be writing a symbol is equal to 20 and a certain symbol is equal to 19.6. You guys try this on your paper. Okay, we don't have to say what anything is. We just have to say, we have to understand the symbols. So who could tell me what symbol goes with this 20 ounces of iced tea, which says that they're supposed to contain an average of 20 ounces of iced tea? David S., what do you think? You think it's what? It is a parameter. So which symbol do we use? When we say average, what are we talking about? Kyle, what do you think? You think P, is that a proportion? Is it like a 0.2? It is mu. So we would say mu equals 20 ounces. Okay. And then it says these bottles contain an average, this is from the sample, of 19.6. So Delaney, which symbol should I use for 19.6? Okay, so X bar is equal to 19.6 ounces. All right, so the 19.6 is the sample, the 20 ounces is the true mean, or what it's supposed to be. Okay. And so we have our parameter and our statistic. I guess we were supposed to say that. All right. Oops, okay. All right. On a New York to Denver flight, 8% of the 125 passengers were selected for random security screening before boarding. According to the Transportation Security Administration, 10% of passengers at this airport are chosen for random screening. So 8% of the 125 passengers that were selected had to do the random screening, but according to the Transportation Security Administration, 10% are chosen for random screening. Okay, so these are percentages, you guys. So are we using mu and X bar on this one? No. Okay, so try this one on your paper. All right, you guys, is 10% the parameter or the statistic? Okay, good. 10% is the parameter, right? This is the true percentage of passengers that are supposed to get a random security check or whatever. Okay, so parameter is P, which is equal to 0.10. Okay, and then the 8% is called a statistic. And the reason we use P is because this is a decimal, right? And so our statistic, you got to know, is P hat. And what is that value, you guys? 0.08. All right, because it's from the sample, and the statistic comes from the sample. Do you guys have any questions?